All right, welcome everyone to tonight's presentation, our virtual history hour. My name is Toby Crawford. I'm the Vice President and Communications Coordinator for the Sullivan Sorrento Historical Society. And tonight's presentation on the Manor Inn and Swiss Chalet has been prepared by Sullivan Selectman Norman Bamford. And he's got some own family connections of his own to these particular historical landmarks, and he's been gracious enough to prepare this and be with us here tonight. The presentation is being recorded, so if anyone wants to revisit it or isn't able to make it tonight, it will be on our YouTube channel later. And so, Norm, thank you for being here. Thank
Oh,
you
thank you
for
for the invite.
being for us. And let's hear about this Manor Inn and Swiss Chalet.
All right. Yeah, as Toby said, I'm selectman for the town of Sullivan. I moved here in 2013, but my connection to the Manor Inn goes way before that. My aunt was married to one of the Gilman boys, and she used to babysit me when I was really little. So some of my earliest memories are inside the inn. And so it's always had a place in my heart. And so when I was asked, to think of a place or something here in Sullivan to talk about historically, I picked the Manor Inn in the Swiss Chalet. And it's been so much fun to research and to dive in and to look at all this stuff. I'm in no way an expert on all things. So if there are some things that are, contradict what is maybe personally involved with the inn, feel free to share that with us. There were a couple things in our history books that I saw that that were not accurate, to include pictures that they said were of the Manor Inn, but were not, and a description of the door, which wasn't accurate either. But I think that was just a problem with punctuation, and they were talking about a different house. So without further ado, the Manor Inn and the Swiss Chalet. Let's see. All right, in the beginning, it's where every good story starts. We have, before there was this, there was an idea. The Sullivan Land Company. The Sullivan Land Company started in 1886 by Clyde Hunt from Boston. He, along with stakeholders, bought 500, give or take, acres from homesteads in Sullivan, mostly interested in Sullivan Harbor. And we see here that this is one of the marketing tools they used for the Sullivan Land Company to market Sullivan Harbor. And we see that it's got this beautiful sandy shore, which it doesn't. We can see the that square building that's up there on the top. That's the Waukeag House. And if you pull in Dunbar's store at that turnout, there's a placard there that talks a lot about the Waukeag House. We're going to talk about it a little bit today. I didn't want to get mired down in that, but it too has an interesting story, and actually is the catalyst that brought about the Swiss Chalet and the Manor Inn. The Sullivan Land Company was formed with an idea of making Sullivan Harbor a better resort than that of Bar Harbor by attracting wealthy visitors and buying the lands for very cheap and selling them quickly for a huge profit. They saw the success of the island. They saw the Waukeag House was built. It was doing phenomenally well, but they also didn't quite understand that the reason why the Waukeag was doing so well wasn't just because of summer tourists, but it was because there was a mining boom here at that time in Sullivan. So Sullivan, this was their heyday in the 1880s. And so these people from Boston, they wanted to be a part of that. Here's another picture of some of their marketing stuff, Sullivan Harbor by Frenchman Bay. This shows more of the roads that are there. Some of them are really, really grown in. I went for a hike today. I went up to the Manor Inn, and then I took a right, and I followed that all the way to the church. And then I came back, and then I walked the other road as far as I could before it came completely impassable. So here we have the Waukeek House, spelled wrong, but there it is. The Waukeek House is built in 1882, and it promoted itself as a grand hotel and started the land boom here in Sullivan, where Mr. Hunt took notice. He acquired many stakeholders in a short period of time, and in 1886, he formed the land company. Now, the cool thing about this picture, and it's driven me nuts because I've seen it in the turnout there at Dunbar's, and it looks like it's shotgun style towards the ocean, but it wasn't. In fact, the other house that you see to the left there, that was part of the original Dunbar store, which was across Route 1. So what we're looking at is almost near the tennis courts, looking up is the angle. And so it went perpendicular to Route 1. And it went, the long way. This photograph made it look like it was going that way because I was like, the hill's way sharper than that. And the reason why it appears that way is because of the angle the photograph was taken. Here's a better shot. We can see here, this is down further past the tennis courts. We can look up. We can see there's the Waukeek House. And then right across the road is the original Dunbar Stores location. And then Willowmere is that white house off to the left. And you would think you'd be able to see the lodge through here, but that's not showing up. Now, here we have the Swiss Chalet. This is actually inside the Swiss Chalet, but our history books for Sullivan for the bicentennial said that this was inside the Manor Inn. Anybody who's been inside the Manor Inn knows that it did have a wonderful fireplace, but it didn't quite look like this one. And we can see through the tables, the chairs, and the balcony that wrapped around the whole top of the Swiss Chalet. This was the Swiss Chalet. The Swiss Chalet was built to be the biggest, the best, the most opulent restaurant that Maine could possibly offer. I remember as a kid, we weren't allowed to be in the restaurant, but we often would sneak. And I remember seeing the chairs and stuff still in the restaurant. Now, of course, that was in the 80s and 90s. I don't know what happened to those later, but look at the intricate woodwork up along the railing of the balcony. And like I said, that went around the top. If you've ever been to Sorrento Public Library, it reminded me so much of the Swiss Chalet. It really looks very similar. So if you ever want to know more about the feel of the building, the Sorrento Library is a good place to start. And here we have some of the literature that was used in marketing. The Swiss Chalet was a Swiss restaurant that was known not only for its great food, but the people were dressed in costume. If I can zoom in here. So we see here that the ladies were all dressed in costume. We have probably a manager back here. And we see that same fireplace right there. And then here's a great shot. Great shot of the outside of the building. And you see it had these wonderful overhangs, these wonderful balconies. My parrot is going nuts. There we go. So they're all taking pictures outside. And you have to remember that photographs were very expensive at this time. So to do this, they were showing off that they had money. They were also showing off that they had this cool niche. So then the Osepi Road and East Drive are the two roads that I hiked. I believe Osepi is the one that's still passable. East Drive is the longer drive, and it's not completely passable anymore. Here we have a picture on the top left is the lodge. The lodge is still standing today and is private residence. It no longer has the tower on top, but if you look through their glass porch, you'd see that the windows and everything are still there. Interestingly enough, in this picture here, we can see the Swiss Chalet, but we cannot see the Manor Inn. That's because the lodge, despite what our history book says, was built prior to the Swiss Chalet and the lodge. And then we have the Wainwright Cottage, that's still standing. The Kimball Cottage is still standing. And then we had the Waukegan Mall, which was this lovely walking area that, it would have went down near Miramar in front of the cottages along the water. Would have been a gorgeous strolling area. The lodge is built shortly after, I was following what it said, shortly after the Swiss Chalet is open because business was booming. But then I realized there is no record of when the lodge was actually built, and our history books say that it was built as an overflow for the Manor Inn. However, the picture shows, and the booklet, and the Historical Society praising Sullivan Harbor mentions the Swiss Chalet, has a picture of the lodge and other hotels that were in the area of the time, but not the Manor Inn. However, in the Historical Society's archive room in the second drawer of the street address file cabinet, you'll find a large folder. And if you're looking at, I think it's 4 Manor Lane, you'll find that there's a folder that has plenty of pictures and a great history on the lodge. And it dates way back before the Sullivan Land Company. And talking to the current owners, they're assuming that the lodge was actually built in the 1850s. So here we go. Now the Manor Inn is built in 1889. We have the lodge off to the right. And then, interestingly enough, the driveway at some point shifted over time, because this shows the driveway goes right up to the front of the inn, and there's this nice circle right in front of the front door. And it's just being, heralded as this amazing place to go. And in this ad here, there's it says now open. It's the finest location on the Maine coast. There's tennis, there's boating, bathing, there's diving, there's salmon and trout and bass, cod fishing. They really played it up as this amazing place for visitors, for wealthy hunters, and their families to come. Here's a wonderful picture taken shortly after it was built. In this picture, it's one of the rare pictures where you can see the bridge. There was a bridge that connected the Manor Inn to the Swiss Chalet. So after eating and indulging in food and stuff, people could walk across the bridge to get to the inn. Here's a great picture of the inn. Now this was taken, I believe, right about the time when the Gilmans would have purchased it. You see, it's got like these shrubs and stuff. So, we're talking mid 80s. But I want you to pay particular attention to the roof lines and the windows here. And why that's important, I'll tell you in just a second. It's because of this guy. This guy, his name was Fred Savage. And while I don't have blueprints to prove this, I can pretty much prove that he was the architect of the Manor Inn. Fred Savage was a very prominent architect at this time. He was actually from Northeast Harbor, and he was working as a carpenter. He was working as a carpenter, and he did such amazing work, and he was so gifted that he was working on this house where this prominent architect's brother-in-law was having built. And the prominent architect, Mr. Peabody, he saw how amazing Fred Savage was and offered him an opportunity of a lifetime to come back to Boston with him and to learn under his tutelage how to become an architect. And so Fred did. He went to Boston for a few years. He got a reputation of being incredibly intelligent and smart and coming up with his own style, which today we know as the shingle style architecture, which one the Manor Inn definitely was. But if you look behind him in the picture, you can see one of his drawings is of a house that looks very similar to the inn. Now, it's not the inn, but it looks very similar. The roof lines and everything is incredibly similar. Another couple examples of Fred's work are these two cottages on Mount Desert. And we can definitely see that there's a strong resemblance to the Manor Inn. Now, why is that important? That's important because if the Manor Inn was, in fact, Fred Savage, who came back to Maine and started his practice in 1887, then the Manor Inn would have been one of his very first projects. So I thought that that was really cool. I kind of geeked out on that for a while. I wasn't even going to put it in this presentation because I didn't want it to take up too much time. But you could see that shingle style architecture, it's very focused on roof lines and windows with the 6 panes on top or more, and then either one solid on the bottom, or it could be divided into two. Very much like the windows of the Manor Inn. Here's a booklet about the Manor Inn and the Swiss Chalet, which Toby found and I thought to be incredibly interesting. And so I have included it for this talk. The Manor Inn and Swiss Chalet is situated at the head of Frenchman's Bay, the most picturesque sheet of water to be found on the American continent, commanding a view of the islands along the coast, as well as the island of Mount Desert. At the foot of the bay is situated Sullivan Harbor. The estate is surrounded by a beautiful park of several thousand acres, which is used as a game preserve and owned by D. Brahman Esquire. Now, we know it wasn't several thousand acres, but they tend to embellish in this booklet quite a bit. There are about 12 miles of roads laid out through the woods where the air is fragrant with the odor of fir balsam. The combination of the mountain air and the rich ozone from the ocean and the soft, balmy odors of fir, pine, and spruce trees from the forest make insomnia unknown there. And they are most invigorating and health-giving. The Manor Inn and Swiss Chalet have accommodations for from 75 to 100 guests. I'm going to say no to that. There's no way that the inn could have fit 100 guests, especially because they're talking about some private rooms later, who have the exclusive privilege of shooting and fishing over the estate. There are several catboats and birch canoes at the pier for the use of the guests. There's a chain of lakes within 5 miles of the house on which there are boats for the exclusive use of the guests of the inn and the chalet. These lakes have been stocked by the government with black bass, landlocked salmon, lake trout, and fishing is the finest in the state of Maine. Makes Sullivan look like a really wonderful place to live. It talks about how Maine got its name from the French, Le Maine. The population of the town is about 1,700. So you remember, that's a little bit more than we have now. This was during the granite boom, during the silver mine boom, is comprised mainly of retired sea captains who have chosen this place to end their days. Direct connection is made with Bar Harbor and the surrounding resorts on the bay by steamers almost every hour, and the Maine Central Railroad makes its direct connection with Sullivan Harbor by running a steamer from Mount Desert Ferry and the end of the railroad direct to the landing at Sullivan, a 10-minute sail. Mr. Frederick Terrell, formerly connected with the Albemarle Hotel in New York, has taken a lease of the Manor Inn and the Swiss Chalet for 5 years and opens it on June 29th, the accommodations of a limited number of guests. The inn and chalet have every accommodation and all the modern improvements. The water supply is a deep well, which has been thoroughly analyzed and tested and is the purest spring water to be found in the entire state of Maine. And rates are from $12 to $18 per week for single rooms. Double rooms are $20 to $30 per week, depending upon location of rooms and length of the visit. So we see here that they were really playing up the location. They were playing up the smells, the sounds, and in other booklets that I didn't include here, one of the big claims to fame was that Sullivan never got any fog, whereas Mount Desert could often be foggy. Sullivan never got any fog, so no fog, and you never lose sleep here. It's really amazing. Here are some of the very wealthy people who have stayed and at the inn. The beginning of the end. Financial struggle in 1891. Now remember, the inn was built in 1887. So by 1891, the land company is struggling. So it borrows money from Dwight Brahman of Boston. Brahman then provided a mortgage to the Sullivan Land Company in June of 1891. And they had a deal that would lend them $14,000 to be paid back in 1 year. They had to pay it back in 1 year at an 8% interest, which it says per year, but it had to be paid back in a year, or deliver to him the properties and the buildings that were on them. This included the Manor Inn and the Swiss Chalet. The case finally made it to Superior Court in November of 1893. 1893, Brahman sues the Sullivan Land Company and acquires some of the property to include the Swiss Chalet and the Manor Inn, and by 1895, he is now the owner of the properties. Despite having to foreclose on the land company, Dwight believes in the project and tries to make a go of it. And I said that because that's the way the newspapers kind of spun it, was that he believed in the property and he thought he could do a better job of making money. I see him as a kind of a land shark here. He found an opportunity to invest and then acquire it within a year. So it was kind of ruthless, but kind of smart. Dwight Brahman and his wife kept the inn going for a number of years. They hosted elaborate parties, serving the finest Swiss and English foods and hosting ice cream socials. He had elaborate balls in summer, and the summer pastime that was enjoyed by most was croquet on the Manor Inn lawn with finger sandwiches. And we see here, you can see the Manor Inn just kind of slightly in the background. And then this flat lawn, which was perfect for croquet. By the 1920s, business had slowed way down at the inn, and Dwight was looking to sell off the land to lease his land for cow pastures. In 1929, at the beginning of the Great Depression, he dies, and he wills the house and restaurant to his wife and her two sisters, Laura and Fanny. And I thought that was interesting. It doesn't say why he did that, but that's what he did. He put them in the will as co-owners of the inn and the restaurant, with the instruction, this was even a little more weird, with the instruction that when they die, their shares go to the Protestant Episcopal Church. In 1939, the inn closed because the ladies were going abroad for the summer, and the inn never reopened. Helen, his wife, dies in 1951, followed by Laura in 1952. And their shares go to become possession of Trinity Church. I assume there was some kind of a name change because they went to this church and it wasn't the Protestant Episcopal Church. Fanny dies in 1960, and Trinity Church now has acquired all of it, and they quickly sell it to the Dunbar brothers and Sullivan. The Dunbar brothers have the land surveyed, and they sell the Manor Inn and the Swiss Chalet very quickly to Lois Bean Pospisil in 1961. Now, Lois didn't own the property for very long. In fact, she she buys it in 1961. She sues the Sullivan Land Company for rights to the property. And I don't know if somebody was giving her a hard time and saying, hey, well, the Sullivan Land Company still has rights to this, that, and the other thing. But she sues them. She gets a clear bill. The house, the restaurant, all belong to her. She then turns around and sells it to her own mortgage company in 1975. The mortgage company holds on to it for just a few years and sells it to the Gilmans in 1980. And here's some pictures of around that time frame. The following pics were taken by the Historical Society in 2013. And as you can see, the house looked to be solid and probably salvageable at that time. So you see here, the front steps had changed. Now they come down instead of before there was like a landing and then it came down to the left. The steps were changed here, and I'm assuming that the Gilmans did that. They were incredible woodworkers, and a lot of their repairs and talents were seen, especially with that porch. Once you went up those stairs, if you went to the left and walked along the front where the porch curved around to the side of the inn, there was a gorgeous sunbeam that was put into the floor there. And I wish I had a picture of that. This up here, this lookout area in the middle, in the Historical Society, there's a young lady whose parents used to take care of the inn during the winters when the Brahmins had it, I guess. And she described the view in a poem from there, which was a really great poem about the beauty of that area. You see that the Swiss Chalet was not holding up so well by 2013. One cool thing that I remember about the Swiss Chalet and not being allowed to go there is Miss Gilman had a horse that was underneath it. There was a stable, and I remember that horse. And at the time, the horse looked like it was 10 feet tall. It was huge. After the death of Mrs. Gilman in 1992, the house fell into steady disrepair and declined rapidly. By 2010s, the last of the people staying there had moved out due to black mold and the inability to stay warm in the winter. A huge hole in the roof formed, and eventually the floors collapsed on each other by 2018. The property was in and out of trouble with the town for back taxes up until 2018, when the last lien was placed on the property but was never released. I think the town foreclosed on the property, and the house was torn down in 2020, though there is no record of that foreclosure that I could find. I know it must have happened, and I've talked to the current owners when they bought it, and one of the things that they had to do is promise that they were going to tear down the house. So just looking at the stuff, the chat here. So the horse's name was Sun. Let's see.
It was no sun.
Was No Sun?
Yes.
Ah. Now, I had asked the question because I thought I remembered in my head that there were 13 bedrooms and 6 baths. And one thing that I remember about that house was it was the first time I had ever seen a clawfoot tub. And I was scared to death of it. I thought it would like carry me away. I also remember being in the kitchen, and that was the first time I ever saw Bewitched, and on a little tiny black and white TV. No sun, no sun. More like 3/4 baths. Let's see. All right, so after this slide, what I have here is it took me a long time to watch. It took 4 years actually before I decided to watch it, and it is the destruction of the inn. So it'll just take me a second to share this. let's see if I can get back to. All right. See, at this time, does anybody have any memories of the inn that they want to share?
I just shared in the chat that I remember there was a lot of people that used to come out to visit during the summer, Gilmans and friends of the Gilmans from the South. And I know that I think there's some people here who used to be part of that group, but that was a pretty memorable time in my childhood.
And was it you or Casey that was telling me about a hippie bus?
I don't know about, I bet other people could probably talk more about that. Beth McMahon says yes.
Yeah, and I know in some of the writings of that little girl that had stayed there when her dad and then her mom took care of the inn for the winters, talked about a dumb waiter that was in the restaurant, and I'm glad I didn't know that as a kid because I definitely would have been playing in that. That would have been dangerous. But yeah, I've been up there several times since it's been demolished, and there's absolutely nothing left or salvageable now.
And I did hear from some folks, it's actually Beverly Billings. She mentioned that her husband's family, I believe it was his aunt or someone in his family, had worked there at the Swiss Chalet, and they were able to salvage some of the chairs from the restaurant, which they still have. So I imagine some of the contents might be spread around in the community. There were so many families with members who were employed or otherwise involved in the restaurant and inn over the decades. So hopefully there are many surviving mementos from within its walls.
I would share also there used to be a ton of ghost stories about
Oh yes,
the
yes.
Manor Inn. There was a ghost room that people would say the bed shook when they stayed in, and the Swiss Chalet especially was supposedly very haunted.
That did give me creepy vibes for sure. Like walking into the kitchen part of the Swiss Chalet, there was like this one closet that just seemed particularly evil. But Mike Bloomfield, you said the front door handles were bronze snakes. Yeah, they were, and I had expressed to Barbara, the current owner, that one thing I wish they would have saved were those door handles because they were just so cool. Obviously, like handcrafted. You remember those, Beth?
Can you say that again?
The front door handles were
Oh, yeah.
bronze snakes.
It was quite an amazing front door.
It was so thick. It was huge.
So I have a question. I am one of the cousins, and I know there are a couple of my aunts on here that might speak to the ghosts if they dare. But I have childhood memories of being there before 1980. So did the Gilmans perhaps rent it before they purchased it? Because like I know there are pictures of me when I was born in 1970, and I know there are pictures of me when I was younger than 10 there.
Oh, interesting. I don't know if the mortgage company would have rented it out, but
This is
that is
Barb. Can you
interesting.
hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm Barb. I'm the oldest of the McDonald family. My mother, Christine, was Dot Gilman's sister. I actually sent my Aunt Dot the information about that home when it was for sale. It was in one of those publications that came out, and I know that was in the mid 70s. maybe even early-ish 70s. I know her mother, my grandmother, died in 1978, and she spent the prior year, like 1976 or 77, there with my aunt Dot, who took care of her. Dot, being a former nurse, wanted to try to keep my grandmother home and not in a nursing home. And in 1977, early 78, my grandmother came back to Gardner, went to a nursing home, and died in September of that year. So I know they lived there well before 1980. And
Is it possible they just didn't take out a mortgage?
it's possible. My recollection is that the house that they purchased at the time was $12,000 or some ridiculous thing like that. Maybe
Yeah.
15,000 at the most. It was
Yeah,
not a lot of money.
yeah, because
And
that was the earliest deed was 1980 when they filed for a mortgage. It was
so they
deeded to
may
them.
have purchased it and then took out a loan to do some of the renovations because it was constantly under construction. And her sons, as you said, were amazing builders and did the
Mhm.
very best they could do to, help bring it back to its glory. And unfortunately, for a number of reasons, that never happened.
Yeah. When I hiked up there, like what is it, like probably 2019, the Swiss Chalet had basically been ready to fall in completely. A tree had crashed through most of it. But I went in and explored what I could safely, I guess. And I noticed that the railings, those ones that I pointed out in the thing, were
Mhm.
redone. And I have a feeling like I think I remember like Bob's name being written on one of them.
It
That
was Bob and Cliff and Jay and Ted that did that construction work, as
yeah,
best I can recall.
yeah, and they did a good job of
Yeah,
recreating the original look.
yeah, they're they're very talented men. And Richard, as you may know, runs a construction or owns his own construction company in New Hampshire and
Mhm.
has been building for a really long time now. I think, and Beth could probably speak to it more than me, that the other brothers have been in that field as well.
Yep.
So I put, oh, go ahead, Beth.
I was just gonna say, yep, Richard's my dad and all of the uncles are carpenters. Still.
Yes.
Right. And my
And I knew Richard was your dad.
yeah,
Um,
now Grandpa Gilman, was he an architect?
yes.
Okay.
I just put in the chat too, he was a city planner for DC.
Ah, interesting. Because I always wondered if the house taught the boys or if it just came naturally.
Maybe a combination of both, but I don't remember it ever being something that they didn't know how to do.
Mm-hmm.
I put a question in earlier, and there's probably, no answer for it, but my grandmother, Dot's mother, and great grandmother, furniture and some belongings were in the house.
Yep.
Do you have any idea what happened to any of the contents before it was demolished?
It all went down with the house.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Like,
Just
well, you saw
makes
that
me,
video at the beginning. Like,
yeah.
there was that table, the
Yeah.
dining room table. And,
I had a
it's,
hard time watching that. It made me cry.
yeah, I mean, all of the china and everything was still in there, myriads of books. Um, when walking the property today, and they're fine with you going up there and walking if you're ever in the area. Um, I did see like a couple ladies' handbags, but it's really hard to see anything because it's all she had the contents spread, so anything big is probably hidden. Oh, and there was this silver tray I saw today, but yeah, there wasn't anything left after they finished with the bulldozer. But I don't know if you saw it up in the chat. I did manage to salvage the leaded glass doors, and I'm restoring those.
Does the town own that property now, or has somebody just purchased the land?
No, the land and the house were purchased when it went up for auction, and the people who now own the lodge actually own it. So the property has been reunited with its former past.
And the lodge was the one closer to the road?
Right. It's like
Right.
if you're looking up in the driveway, there's Willowmere, and then
Yeah.
there's the lodge behind it.
Okay, yep. I haven't been up there for a while. I haven't had the courage to go back.
Do you remember the last time that you were there?
Probably not since my aunt died in 1992.
Brenda, Judy, Janet, anybody want to talk about ghosts? Oh, the silence.
Mm-hmm.
Love to hear about ghosts.
Yeah.
I think they scared me more than a ghost might have.
Right.
My aunt scaring me with stories. There were definitely places that, as a kid, Dot was she was just so wonderful. It was so free, and like nothing was off limits. I don't know that we were encouraged to go over to the chalet, but I didn't dare go much past the second floor because it was just scary. But I was younger than 10
Mm-hmm.
when I would visit. But I know my sister, who's also on here, Rebecca, she would spend weeks at a time in the summer with Dot, who just, somebody said that she taught them how to make flower wreaths. And we have cousins that are 10 years younger than me who would go up and do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a wonderful free time.
See in the chat that Lucy says, Mrs. Gilman soothed me to sleep in the master bedroom after she passed once. I always felt safe there. Obviously, they cared very much for the property. It seems like a lot of folks did, and there's a lot of memories and emotions attached, especially watching it come down, which made me cry my eyes out when I first saw it as well. It's yeah, such a part of the community.
Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes when the glue of the family passes away, things like that go with them.
And Margaret Carnes has a question. Does anyone know when the property down to the bay that the Brahmins had was separated and sold?
It was a triangular chunk that abutted Edgewater, and then went east for a distance. There is now one house, the Lindegrens house, is on a piece that was part of that, is my understanding.
Tell you what, I can research that and I can get back to you. Do you? I'm easy to find on Facebook. I'm the
No,
only.
I don't do Facebook, so.
Ah, okay. All right. So Norm Bamford at yahoo.com.
Thanks, Norm.
Send me what you know and I'll research and I'll get back to you.
Is it Norm Bamford with no punctuation?
Right. Just NORMBAMFORD at yahoo.com.
Okay.
Yes, and that says, thank you so much for doing this, Norman, which I wholeheartedly agree.
Well,
This
it's
is,
great to get, like, this is going to be recorded and it's now
yeah,
the Manor Inn, the Swiss Chalet has its story told and preserved.
yes,
It's
If
preserved by,
anybody's got pictures of
terrific
the
to hear
inside,
some of this because as a child in the 50s, there was an old woods road. You could go in up behind the Baptist church and in and
yeah,
around and see, sneak in, so to speak, and see some of that property. And I haven't been up there probably for 25, 30 years anyway. And I thought about trying to do it last summer, but had no idea what the situation was up in there. I didn't know the house and chalet were gone. So this has been fascinating.
yeah, you can still drive up past the church. However, there's
No, Roger and uh, others did a huge bunch of cutting. I
yeah,
could
that's what I'm
not
saying.
find the road last summer. I hunted.
Yeah. Are you going to try again this summer? Because I could show you where the road connects.
Okay, well, I might.
Yeah. Yeah, I hiked it today.
Oh, okay. Well, if we're okay going up the driveway to the house, then it might be easier finding it from that end than from where uh they
From
did all that cutting last year.
Yep. The yeah, the current owners, they viewed that as town road, which it still is. So it's completely accessible.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about somebody coming out and saying, "Hey, you can't go up there."
Yeah.
Oh, that's a cool thing. I'm gonna have to look see if I can find that book.
Yeah, there is a cemetery somewhere in those woods.
Yes, I was trying to find it all day today. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, that cemetery is a Salter Cemetery.
Yeah.
The house that Monica, can't think of her last name, lives in, was the Salter Homestead, and they were one of the original land grants. But their family from War of 1812 and Revolutionary War are on a side hill way down in there, and I'm just hoping that when they cut there, they didn't get, but we haven't been able to get down since.
Well, there certainly was no sign on the portion of the cut area that I walked last summer of
No.
a cemetery.
Well, I'm hoping that,
It hasn't been for years.
yeah, that it's beyond where they cut. I
Where
mean,
they
it was
cut.
quite a ways down in there. It was probably half a mile anyway.
Oh, then it would probably be beyond where they cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Norm, thank you for a wonderful presentation. You've got, it's wonderful to have family members and folks with memories. And I think we'll be able to work some more memories out and include them in our records so that we have them on file as part of the Manor of the Swiss Chalet and Manor Inn. It's great to get firsthand accounts, memories. It's
Yeah, the from what I found, the historical society doesn't have any pictures of the inside of the inn. So if anybody has pictures of the inside of the inn that we could include into the records, that would be amazing.
Yes.
Thanks so much for doing this No, Norman, and this is I think a wonderful boost to the Sullivan Sorrento Historical Society to have these webinars. Thank you so much for the initiative to
Absolutely.
get them going.
Thank you, Margaret.
Yes, Norm, I want to thank Norm. This is Jean Edwards. I want to thank Norm and also Toby.
Toby for making it
who
happen.
comes up with these marvelous programs. And this was really neat. The part of the tearing down the Manor Inn and all, and the music, wow, that music really went with it. It was quite an emotional thing, but I'm glad that you included that. Thank you, Norm.
Yeah, as much as I didn't want to watch it, I knew it was part of the history of the inn and it had to be told. But
All right.
okay.
Well, thank you everyone for attending this evening. We'll have
Good
the
night.
presentation up on our YouTube channel within a day or two. We'll send out a link for that for anyone who wants to revisit. And let's see, Mike Bloomfield there were a couple houses in Sorrento, Castletop, and Blueberry Lodge that were built by the same people. Probably likely. All right. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you, Norm. Thank you everyone on
Thank you,
behalf of
Debbie.
the Historical Society. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Thanks.
All right. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.